Hey everyone, and welcome to the inaugural edition of Deck Tech Tuesday, where each and every week I go over a different deck in a different format and just, have fun with it, throw some random brews out there, and just try to have fun. This time we're going to be going into the brand new Frontier format with a deck called Blue-Red Prowess. Now, this deck is pretty similar to its standard counterpart. There's not much of a difference of how it was built originally, just some additional cards from like Eldritch Moon and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what's inside of the deck. Starting off with our creatures, we have a playset of Monastery Swiftspear, so it's a single red mana for a 1/2 with haste and prowess. Now, what prowess is whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So all of the creatures in our deck are going to have this prowess ability or have it in some sort of fashion, and we're also jamming a bunch of cheap, efficient spells just to get our stuff huge and then just swing out and win with like damage and a bunch of other cool stuff. And as far as Monastery Swiftspear goes, she's really good considering that she's a 1-drop with haste, which is already really good in itself, and it has 2 toughness, which makes it relevant, so that way it isn't chump blocked by like 1/1 tokens and then it just dies. We can always play it turn 1, get in some damage, and then we can play some other spells and make it big. It's very akin to another card like Goblin Guide, where it's a 1-drop with haste that can have 2 power. Our next creature is Abbot of Keep, so for 1 and a red mana we get a 2/1 with Prowess, and whenever Abbot of Keep enters the battlefield, we exile the top card of our library. Until end of turn we may play that card. So this card's really good to play like in the first main phase. We reveal the top card of our library and we hit a land, boom, we can just play it, given that we haven't played a land already that turn. And a majority of the spells in our deck cost either 1 or 2 mana, save for a couple other cards, but a majority of this deck is 1 to 2 mana, so we will be able to cast pretty much anything that the Abbot reveals off the top of the library. Next we have a playset of Elusive Spellfist. For 1 and a blue mana we get a 1/3, and whenever we cast a non-creature spell, Elusive Spellfist gets +1/+0 until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. So this is essentially Prowess. It doesn't buff the toughness, but that's fine because the creature already has 3 toughness already. So whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it just gets the +1/+0 ability, and it also gains that additional it can't be blocked, which is actually pretty relevant in like board states where something is really gummed up and they've been using removal spells on all of our stuff, and then we can play something like this, and then if they don't have an answer for it, we can just get them because we just cast stuff like Titan Strength and just make it really huge and then swing with this guy because he can't be blocked. And for our final creature, we have Stormchaser Mage. For a blue and a red, we have a 1/3 with flying and haste and prowess. So this card is pretty much Monastery Swiftspear but leveled up in a way. It costs an additional blue mana, but as compensation we get an additional point of toughness and flying. And that flying part is really relevant because having a 2-drop with prowess that also has evasion makes this card super decent. Moving into our non-creature spells, we start off with 3 Expedite. Expedite is a single red instant. Target creature gains haste until end of turn and draw a card. So we can only target Elusive Spellfist and Abbot of Keep. I mean, we can also target Stormchaser Mage or Monastery Swiftspear if we need to, but we pretty much want to be playing this on our Spellfists or Abbots of Keep, so that way we can get that stuff out and then just swing with it immediately. But even if we already have hasty creatures on the board, just having the draw card clause on it is good enough for the deck. Next we have an Otherworldly Outburst. For a single red mana instant, target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and when that creature dies this turn, put a 3/2 colorless Eldrazi Horror creature token onto the battlefield. So this card helps buff our prowess guys just a little bit more. It being an instant helps out considerably, but the best part about it is that if that creature dies due to removal or through combat damage, we get a 3/2 in its place, so that way we're not left completely empty on the board in case we're in a situation like that. Next we have a 2 of Rush of Adrenaline. For a single red instant, target creature gets +2/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. So again, being an instant makes this super decent. A lot of the cards in our deck are instants anyways, so only the best sorceries in the deck really get to be put in. And while the buff on this card isn't too tremendous, just the fact that it gives trample for a single red mana is pretty much worth it in of itself, because we can give our Monastery Swiftspear, some relevant way to push through some damage just to end the game. Next, we have a playset of Titan Strength. For a single red mana instant, target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn, and then we get to scry 1. So this card is just a tad bit better than Rush of Adrenaline, not because it buffs the power just one more point, but because of that scry 1 clause. Being able to scry in a deck like this is super relevant, and something that we need the most is consistency. So Titan Strength is a definite 4 of in a strategy like this. Next, we have a 2 of Slip Through Space. For a single blue mana, we have a sorcery that's devoid, so that means that the spell, even though we cast it for a blue mana, it technically doesn't have a color or a color identity. And it also reads, target creature can't be blocked this turn, and we draw a card. So we can pretty much suit up one of our guys and make it super huge, and then we cast a card like Slip Through Space, make it unblockable, and then win the game. Again, this card is a little bit more playable because of the draw card clause. If it didn't say draw card, I don't know if I would actually play this in the deck, but since it does replace itself in case, our creature dies or whatever, it's definitely playable in the deck. Next, we have a 3 of Temur Battle Rage. So for 1 and a red instant, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So that in of itself is okay, I guess. I mean, having like a 3/3 with double strike and it's not being blocked or anything, that can do some serious damage to our opponent. But the real key part in it comes from the Ferocious ability, and that reads, that creature also gains trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So conveniently in this deck, the goal is we're going to be getting our creatures as relatively as huge as possible, and getting up to 4 power isn't hard at all. So pretty much giving our creature double strike and trample is pretty much going to win us the game if we play it correctly. And this spell is the reason why a deck like this is successful in the first place. So for our non-creature spells that don't specifically buff up our creatures, we start off with Fiery Impulse. For a single red mana instant, it deals 2 damage to target creature. But if we have Spell Mastery, meaning that if we have 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in our graveyard, which we more than likely will a good 90% of the time, Fiery Impulse deals 3 damage to that creature instead. So it's half of a lightning bolt that hits creatures and can help clear small stuff out of our way for our creatures to help swing through and close the game out for us. Next, we have a 3 of Lightning Strike. For 1 and a red instant, Lightning Strike deals 3 damage to target creature or player. This is pretty much double the cost of Lightning Bolt for the same effect. And it's pretty playable in Frontier. While I do wish it was a Lightning Bolt instead, we'll take what we can get. Again, this card being removal, it can also hit our opponent in the face just in case, they're at a super low life total and it becomes super relevant whenever we hit them for 3 damage. And for our final spell of the deck, we have Treasure Cruise. For 7 and a blue sorcery, we get to draw 3 cards. Okay, for real, paying 8 mana for drawing 3 cards is pretty garbage, right? Well, thankfully the card has Delve. So Delve is a alternative casting cost, essentially. Well, not really, it's a cost reduction mechanic. So we need cards in our graveyard for Delve to work. And Delve reads, each card you exile from your graveyard while casting the spell pays for 1. So virtually we could have 7 cards in our graveyard, exile them, and then we'd only have to pay a single blue mana for the spell to draw 3 cards, aka Ancestral Recall, aka Banned in Modern and Banned in Legacy, and Restricted in Vintage. We might as well take advantage of this super sweet draw spell while we can in this format, because I have a feeling that a spell like this could easily be bannable. Plus, being able to draw 3 cards for 1 mana in our Prowess deck to draw even more pump spells is super relevant and something that we want anyways. Starting off with our lands, we're going to get those boring basics out of the way, so we have 4 islands and 7 mountains. Nothing special, just adding red and blue mana. And moving on to our non-basics, we have a playset of Shivan Reef, so it taps for a colorless mana, or we can tap it to add red or blue, and then Shivan Reef deals a damage to us. Not too bad for a budget dual land, but in a deck like this, it's not really a budget option. This is pretty much one of the better lands for the deck, because having lands come into play untapped is very relevant in a deck like this. And for our final non-basic land, we have Spire Bluff Canal, which is the speed land that finishes out the cycle from Scars of Mirrodin. And it's a red or blue dual land that when it enters the battlefield, it enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 2 or fewer other lands. So if this is our 3rd land, or our 4th land I should say, then it enters tapped. If it's one of the first 3 lands of the game, then it enters the battlefield untapped. Starting off with our sideboard, we have a 2 of Tormod's Crypt, which is a 0 mana artifact, and then we tap and sacrifice it to exile target player's graveyard from the game. Do you know how much I wish this card was legal and standard right now, because I can't stand how Delirium cannot be interacted with pretty much at all, save for cards like Void Shatter and stuff, but Tormod's Crypt can really help against graveyard strategies just by killing the graveyard, in case our opponent's playing any Delve spells or is playing Delirium. We can use Tormod's Crypt to pretty much take out their graveyard and gain an advantage and hopefully win over them. we have a one of Ceremonious Rejection, which is a single blue instant counter target colorless spell. So we bring this in against like artifact strategies that are giving us a hard time, or if our opponent's got like Smuggler's Copter or Emrakul or anything relevant that we can counter for a single blue mana. Next, we have a 2 of Stubborn Denial. For a single blue mana instant, we get to counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. So it's half of a 4 spike, which is pretty mediocre. You know, if this card just pretty much only said that, this card probably would not be playable. But since it has the Ferocious ability at the bottom, which reads, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, we just counter that spell outright instead. So like Temur Battle Rage, Stubborn Denial gets much better if we have Ferocious online. And again, since we're playing the Prowess deck, getting up to power 4 or greater is pretty easy in this deck. Next, we have a 3 of Negate. For 1 and a blue instant, we get to counter target non-creature spell. So we pretty much bring this in against like Gideon type decks, or like Jeskai Black, or save it for stuff like whenever our opponent casts Rally the Ancestors, and like Ugin and other super relevant non-creature spells that can pretty much just kill us outright. Next, we have a 2 of Lightning Axe. So for a single red mana instant, Lightning Axe deals 5 damage to target creature or player. As an additional cost to cast Lightning Axe, we either have to discard a card or pay an additional 5 extra mana. So this card is a pretty decent removal spell in red. It helps nail pretty much everything in the format that's relevant. And for a single red mana, you can't really go wrong, even if you have to discard an additional card to it, or I mean, you could pay 6 mana if you're ever in the situation where you can. I mean, like, you might as well. But for 99% of the time, you're going to be discarding an additional card in order to cast the spell, in order to hit something on the ground, so that way you can swing with your creature and then win. And the same goes for Roast, but it's pretty different from Lightning Axe, though. For colorless and red mana, it's a sorcery that deals 5 damage to target creature without flying. So yeah, this can't hit anything in the air, but this pretty much nails everything else on the ground. You know, if our opponent has like Sylvan Advocates or Grim Flayers or what have you, you know, this pretty much takes care of them. Next, we have a single Disperse, which is 1 in a blue instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Again, another way to interact with planeswalkers or like enchantments that are giving us big problems. Kind of like those weird Starfield decks, we can just bounce their Starfield to Nyx or their Sigil of the Empty Throne back to their hands, and then hopefully find a way to close the game out. And for our final spot in the sideboard, we have Thermal Alchemist. So for 1 and a red, we get a 0/3 Human Shaman with Defender. And whenever we tap it, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. But since we're playing a deck that's chock full of instant and sorcery spells, we get to take advantage of its second ability, which is whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we untap Thermal Alchemist. So we bring this in addition with our other creatures as just like an additional way to drain our opponent out of life in case, you know, we can't hit them with any creatures, in case, you know, they're gumming up the board and it's too dangerous for us to hit them. We can play a bunch of instants and sorceries on a guy and just untap and tap Thermal Alchemist and hit our opponent for like 4 or 5 damage, and then we could cast a Temur Battle Rage on our Storm Chaser Mage and then just kill them that way. And that's the deck tech I have for all of you this week. If you like what you saw and you want to keep seeing more stuff like this, hit that subscribe button. You know, it really helps me out a lot. And liking the video and, you know, putting a comment down in the comment section down below, you know, letting me know what you think about the deck and just giving me some good insight into how you would play it would really help me in terms of building decks in the future for you guys to watch. Anyways, I've been Tasty Snackies. You all have been wonderful, and I'll catch you all on the flip side.